Good morning. My name's Councillor Vikki Slade and I am Leader of BCP Council, and this is our budget special from the for this month's Leaders Live. We're primarily going to be talking about issues that have come up from the budget. So we have had a lot of questions that have come in that are related to specific local issues. So we're going to try and focus on those if we can. The budget, as you may know, was approved on Tuesday, and you can watch the whole meeting back on YouTube. Council tax bills will be prepared now off the back of that budget, and attached to the council tax bills, there's going to be a letter from me which explains some of the context, and also a sort of what they call an infographic, which shows where the money is going, just so you've got an idea of just how much of the funding that we get that goes into things like adult social care and children's services. The whole point of the budget was to change the sort of dynamic of the council. Councils across the country just don't have enough money to offer all the services that we might be used to. And our job is to make sure that we focus on the most vulnerable people, keep communities clean and safe, and protect the infrastructure that we have. And what we've been really clear about doing is making sure we've got a strong financial future. And what that means is not just making sure we've balanced the books for this year, but we've also balanced the books for the next 4 years, as much as we can, knowing that we're going to have a new government at some point and that things change, inflation and interest rates. But what we've done is we've made sure that with the things we can control, we aren't going to have to come back next year and say, oh, we need another 20 million, another 20 million. And that's quite an unusual thing to do. But it does mean this year we've taken some really, really tricky decisions. We have got 6 questions we've started with. Obviously, there is the opportunity for you to ask questions as you go along. And one thing I would say before we start is I just want to reference local issues and the sort of general stuff that councillors deal with. The council has got a report it function, and I'm hoping someone's going to put it along the bottom of the screen. If you've got things like potholes, hedges that need cutting, council's hedges that need cutting, obviously we can't cut people's private hedges, graffiti on public land, not private land, again, we can only deal with public land, those sorts of localised issues, there is a report it function, which is really effective. And I would really recommend that you use it, because you can actually ask to get updates, so you get told when something is done. The other thing to bear in mind is that every single resident has at least 2 ward councillors. Some areas have 3. The details of the ward councillors can be found again on the council's website, along with contact details for those councillors. And really, those local issues, if you're not getting any joy through the report it, go to them. That's what they're for. As much as I would love to do the general sort of, why hasn't this road been resurfaced, or what are you going to do about a local problem, I can't do it for 76 councillors. That is their job. So the questions we've got to start with. The first question has come from Ibrahim Basayuni. Thank you for asking another question. Is I'm here on most months, so it doesn't seem to matter what day we do it. Ibrahim's always with us. Ibrahim wants to know about social housing, and he's absolutely right. You know, a lot of people now have no chance of ever owning their own home. And even if they do, you know, mortgages are now 40 years plus, which is completely barking mad. We are doing our best to invest in new social housing. You know, we can only invest in social housing where we can actually borrow the money to make it add up. And we are doing that. So last year we opened Alice Gardens, which are some fabulous new homes in Newtown. Some of the families have come straight from hostels and homeless locations, and some of them were sold for shared ownership, so that people have got the opportunity to get on the housing ladder. There's a Hilborn development, which is 110 new homes, half social rent, half shared ownership. The building's going to start on that literally within weeks. We're looking forward to having those on stream within a couple of years. We opened our Herbert Avenue temporary housing property, which has again taken people out of affordable, temporary emergency housing. What we can't do is we can't build properties that we can't afford to pay back the debt on. that's the reality. The land prices are so high now, and we are doing everything we can to get as many properties through the system. And of course, if more private properties are built by developers, then the prices will stop going up quite so much. So there is a balance to be struck here. I don't think it's our job as a council to be building homes for people that can afford to buy their homes elsewhere. But sometimes we have to, in order to be able to bring the money in, to be able to fund the payback on building properties. So there's a lot of information in our council housing new build strategy, and we are also targeting our homeless population through money that's coming in from the government. So, we're doing everything we can, but it's a very complicated space. The next question, somebody just wants to know about Carter's Quay while we're talking about properties. Nothing's changed with Carter's Quay in the last few months. You'll know that the developer has gone into administration. That means we have to deal with the administrators. So, our land is, we have a mortgage on the property, which means that we're sort of safe, if you like. But it does mean that until the administrators make a decision about what happens, we're a little bit stuck. There was an update to Cabinet a couple of months ago, so do have a look on the Cabinet papers and you'll see the updates. And as soon as we can get those built, we will, because there's council money invested in those properties, and we want to make sure that there's 140 odd homes that we can get built for people down in Hamworthy, where we have a desperate need for new homes. So moving on to the second question that's come from Tracy, which is about Kings Park. This is about the plant nursery. So just for clarity, it's a plant nursery that has been open for 100 years in Kings Park, and it forms part of the park. It's covered by the Five Parks Act. So there is absolutely no question that this could be developed for housing or sold. And it's really frustrating when we hear these conspiracy theories and lies coming forward. Fundamentally, this is a plant nursery that historically grew plants to be used in traditional parks. Years ago, councils across the country have scaled right back on that type of planting. It's expensive, it's not great for the environment because it has to be redone every year. It's hugely difficult to maintain. Looks very pretty, but actually with the changing climate, that this sort of planting isn't working anymore. So years ago, the council pulled back on that. Now, that nursery cost over £500,000 to operate last year, and the income that came in was just over 300,000. So the council taxpayers of Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole were subsidising the nursery £225,000 last year. That's not okay. I mean, that just doesn't make any sense. If you had a business that was losing £250,000 a year, and this has happened year after year after year, if you go back over the last 5 or 6 years, £1.2 million of losses on a plant nursery. When we have to prioritise people who have nowhere to live, and children who are disabled, and elderly people who need personal care, it's just not okay that we're spending £250,000 subsidising people getting pretty hanging baskets. Now, what's really important about this is that the site is part of the Kings Park. It's got community groups that operate there. Some of the community groups are going to carry on operating there. But within hours of the announcement that we were no longer going to be funding this, we've had 2 or 3 community groups and charities come forward straight away and said, we'll run it. We'll take it on. So those conversations are happening. And the original decision record to close it clearly stated that we wanted it to be taken over by the community. And there's £10,000 left in the budget for this year to help that become a reality. The reason that the decision happened in the order that it did is we have a responsibility, first of all, to our staff, and staff who are under threat of redundancy have to be notified of expected changes before we go public. It would be awful if staff found out about things through the public. But unfortunately, in this case, the information leaked in a way that we wouldn't have wanted it to. But frankly, it's just not something we can afford to do. And the reason that it wasn't subject to a consultation, so some things were consulted on in the budget, this wasn't, was because we had already looked to see if there was any way of making this viable. It was going to take 3 years to break even. We don't have 3 years, not when we have to find £40 million. So we weren't consulting on it because it wasn't an option. If we'd had the choice to say, shall we close it or shall we do something else, it would have gone in the consultation. And that explains why this didn't go in the consultation. And something like the paddling pools, which we have been able to have an alternative to, did go in there. So hopefully that explains a bit more about it, but please do not think there's no question of this site being sold. And the other thing to say is, because of the Bournemouth Borough Council Act, which is known as the Five Parks Act, we can't actually hand it over to a commercial company, like a local garden centre, to run it. It has to be either in council or community or charity operations. So question 3 is about debt, which is obviously perfect in terms of the conversation about the budget. So the first thing to say is that for many, all councils have debt. We can't build social housing without borrowing. We can't, we can't invest in anything without borrowing. We don't have the money in the bank. And councils borrow under something called the Public Works Loan Board, which is cheaper funding than going to the banks, and it enables us to often borrow over a very long period of time. About 2 years ago, the council had, 3 years ago, the council had about £450 million worth of debt in total, and that includes all the projects that are sort of lined up. That was increased under the previous administration to 770 million, and then increased again at the beginning of last year to 1.3 billion. We were very uncomfortable about that, and one of the early things we did was ask audit to look at taking that debt ceiling down, and that's now been gone through council, that our debt ceiling is 770 million. And that means that we can't borrow more money than that without the council as a whole taking the decision to do that. Obviously, we have to service that debt. In other words, we have to pay it back, and we have to pay the interest on that debt. And in January, we took a decision to change the way that we pay that back, as recommended by some advisors, to the same way that we run our mortgages, so through an annuity basis. And in last year, we were paying £9.4 million a year to service our debt. This year, it'll be down to about £2 million a year to service the debt. But every time we borrow money, we have to think about the debt. So if we're asked to borrow £5 million to buy something which has a lifespan of 10 to 15 years, we can only pay that back over about 10 years. So that 5 million would have a cost of payback of about £500,000 a year plus interest. So maybe £650,000 a year if we borrow £5 million. So that has to be factored in, and that has to be funded out of your council tax. So that's why we don't want to have just borrowing going through the roof unless it's for stuff that we know we need to do and that we know we can pay back. So that's a little bit about debt. But I would encourage you, Matthew, in talking about debt, listen to our audit committee meetings. They're really good. We've got some great people on there from across all political groups, who that's what they look at is, are we doing the right thing about the way we do debt, the way we take risk, and those sorts of things. So the next question we have is about splash parks and paddling pools. So thank you, Kathy. And thank you, Kathy, if you've been involved in the petition. So for clarity, the original budget proposals that we were consulting on at the end of last year was that we couldn't afford to run the 4 paddling pools that we have: Littledown, Christchurch, Quomps, Redhill and Hamworthy. The cost of running them is massive. We all know, if we've had little ones, that they go in the water, they wee in the water, sometimes they have accidents in the water, and so the chemicals and the draining and the maintenance and making sure that there's no cracks and there's no sharp edges, bottles end up in there by mistake, things blow in there. There's a lot of maintenance involved in paddling pools that can cost a lot more than anyone could possibly imagine. There's just no way we could afford to keep them going. So the proposal was to stop funding them. But in making that announcement, we were very clear we wanted to talk to community groups, and we are delighted that we've been successful. Littledown has that should be going across to to BH Live, who run Little Downs Leisure Centre. That's all in the mix at the moment, and we're hoping that the agreement can be resolved very, very soon. Hamworthy, the Friends of Hamworthy Park, are taking that on in conjunction with the concession, so the cafe there. So, you know, please do support them, because, you know, they're doing their very best to keep that going. The Christchurch Quants, we've managed to come to an arrangement with Christchurch Town Council, which is really good news, and it's in their budget for the next year. So that will be carrying on, you know, the detail of how they're going to manage that will be, you know, part of the Christchurch way forward. I just want to say something, and the final one is Red Hill. So Red Hill, we haven't managed to find someone to take that on, but what we have been able to do is reverse some of the decisions about the grounds maintenance staff cuts, which has allowed them to keep that going. And we've put some money in for this year to help fund things like the chemicals. But we are going to have to find another way to fund Red Hill. And if we're going to save Red Hill, the only way we're going to be able to do it is to either find somebody who's prepared to take that on, somebody that's prepared to sponsor it, or some way of perhaps looking at a payment. You know, we've had people respond to the consultation saying they'd happily pay £1 or £2 for their children to go in it. So we're looking at ways we might be able to do something using the cafe to actually sell wristbands or tokens to use the paddling pool. And the petition, Kathy asked whether the petition's influenced the decision. Of course it has. You know, the public, we knew that this would be unpopular, and we knew, and that's why we were already looking at alternative ways. The petition made it really clear how strong people felt about that. And I hope those people that responded to the petition will actually respond to the need to potentially, you know, make a small payment to use the paddling pools if they can, so that we don't have this problem in the future. We have also brought in a new fund for ward improvements, and that allows local councillors to use a small amount of money each year into hyper-local projects. And it might be that councillors use some of that money to support community groups to make these things happen. So I would encourage you to work with your councillors to come up with solutions and see what's the biggest priority in your area. And it really talks to, you know, petitions. Petitions are hugely important. On Tuesday, we had a massive petition about children's services. You know, when people want to talk to the council, we'd encourage them to do it properly, do it through the consultations, do it through petitions, do it through questions, you know, use your councillors. That's what we're here for. So moving on to question 5, which is a question about Bournemouth. You know, Maxine, I'm really sort of disappointed about the comment about plan to tidy and clean it up. If you've been to Bournemouth recently, you'd know actually there's a huge amount that's being done, and it is clean, it is tidy. You know, we've got to start talking Bournemouth up and not talking Bournemouth down. And that's why we had the town centre survey to understand what people's priorities were. We had the town centre summit at the end of October to see who is prepared to put their piece of the jigsaw in. It's not just about the council. You know, we don't own all the shops and offices and buildings in town. We own the town hall and a couple of others. But actually, if people's businesses are boarded up and they don't fix their broken windows and they don't remove the graffiti off their own properties, that's not something we can do. You know, we have litter pickers out every day. You might have seen I was out in January from 4 o'clock in the morning, you know, litter picking and street cleaning. It's clean. When you get up in the morning, it's clean. You know, if people are dropping stuff during the day, we're working as hard as we can to clear that crap up. But at the end of the day, you know, people make this mess. We aren't making this mess. We're working with the BID, the Business Improvement District, to make sure that there's hanging baskets up, the planters are being fixed. We've put £365,000 in across the 3 town centres. It's 180,000, I think it is, in Bournemouth on Town Improvement Fund. And we've now got Sir Connor Burns acting in his capacity as the MP for Bournemouth West, which covers the whole of the town centre, Lansdowne, and everywhere like that, so that we have a town centre action group, and that's going to have all the players on there trying to drive things forward. We need the police to do their bit, we need the businesses to do their bit, the council needs to do their bit, and the public needs to do their bit as well. So you keep listening for what we're doing, and let's start talking the place up, because when you go around the place, you know, the effort that's going in to actually cleanse and keep things tidy is really, really good. Final question of the one, and then I'm going to go back around some of the new questions. So Dorset Council have increased the council tax on second homes by 100%. Have we got similar plans? Yes, Stuart, we have. It's in the budget, but it's tricky because you have to give 12 months notice of the change. So, and this is the same for Dorset Council. The law only recently changed. No council will be able to charge the double council tax on second homes until April 2025 because of the way it has to be advertised in the press this year with a 12-month notice. The other downside is, of course, and we've had quite a few of these cases, is if you've got an empty home because an elderly person has died, and it takes 6 months for the probate to come through, and then you put property on the market, and then it takes ages to sell, then you, as the people who have got to deal with that property, have got to find that extra council tax. And that's caused some real concern for some people. So we are doing what we can to sort of manage that change. But ultimately, if a property is empty, we will be charging double council tax, and we will be making sure that the council is collecting that money and using that in the best way that we can, ideally to reduce homelessness and make sure that people, you know, have somewhere to live. The expectation is that it should raise £5 to £6 million per year. That would be amazing if it does. But we know how these things work. You know, managing and enforcing that's not going to be that easy. So we're looking at ways to do that. So let's just move then to the questions on the sidebar. So Steve Nichols at 111 asked a question, and I'm literally picking this at random. Would the council still need to find 6 million? Why does the authority not introduce a flat penalty charge? So the council doesn't need to find 6 million. The council has balanced its budget. So the council has now established that the money coming in and the money coming out from the council's funding is balanced, and it is balanced now for each of the next 4 years. So I don't think you're accurate in saying we need to find £6 million. So let's just park that. But in terms of a flat £500 per child absent from school during term time, really? Are you serious? Like, there's all sorts of reasons why kids are off school. We're not talking about kids going to the Caribbean. I'm sure there are some, but there are lots of reasons that children aren't at school. And actually, I personally don't think that it's down to the council to charge a family who are probably already in crisis, have probably already got major problems with mental health of their children, or, you know, the caring responsibilities. Or maybe I've heard stories of girls not going to school because they can't get period products. And so they're staying at home because they can't bear the idea of going to school, because they can't look after, you know, can't be hygienic. Now, schools are being brilliant providing for those things, but kids have still got to get on the bus. Yeah, there are parents who can't get their kids to school on the bus. There's all sorts of reasons. So I'd like to move away from that and say, I don't think it's for the council to be fining people £500. I think it's for the council to work with schools to try and unpick what are the reasons children aren't in school, why are children not coping at school, how can we make children safe at school. If parents are going on holidays, then, you know, that they know they're on an authorised absence, and there is a process where parents can be fined, but I don't think that that's a flat fee, and we certainly shouldn't be using it to raise money for the council. In fact, I don't even think it comes to the council. You know, if it personally, I'd like to see money coming into the council to help families who are home educating their children, because I think a lot of them are saving the government a huge amount of money in home educating and doing a great job. Not all of them, but a lot of them. And at the moment, they get very little support, and they're all giving up their jobs to be able to do this because they don't feel the school system's working for them. Kerry asked a question back at 109. How about ASB? Why are we not working with the children that most need it? So Kerry asked a question about ASB. Quite a broad question. around youth centres and targeted work. There is targeted work going on. The youth centres that have closed, that were run by the council, that's been a trajectory for quite a long time. Quite a lot of councils haven't got them, and a lot of places. It's parish councils that are supporting them. We don't have parish councils other than in Christchurch, and it may be that we need to look at another model for helping to fund community groups to run their youth clubs. For full disclosure, you'll have seen I left the chamber on Tuesday when there was a discussion about funding youth clubs, because I do run a youth club that's voluntary run, and we're in the process of trying to buy the building off the council so that we can be completely self-sustainable. And I would be glad to work with anybody who's looking to do that. But there is targeted work happening. We do have youth outreach happening. And if there are children that are causing antisocial behaviour, they may well be known to early help. They may well be known to the police or others. So in terms of ASB, it's not just young people causing ASB, it's all sorts of people. Work with your local councillors to see what targeted work is going on. I do know that there is targeted work that happens with outreach workers at places like the bus station, in the town centres, and trying to reach out with the youth bus to look after those young people that need a bit of extra support. Daniel at 109 asked about an update on the safety valve. I'm going to be really brief because we've only got 4 minutes left. There was a substantial debate about this on Tuesday night. Safety valve is the government's scheme to help councils to fund the very high cost of school placements for children with special educational needs and disabilities. It's hugely controversial, and it's not something that can happen without a huge amount of debate. In a very, very brief way, the situation is that the council has to fund placements for children with disabilities outside of mainstream schools. Those placements, so a mainstream school placement is about £5,500 a year. If you've got a child with additional needs, they could be being paid £20,000, £30,000, £40,000 a year for their school if it's a council or state special school. If it's a private special school, some of those schools are costing £100,000 a year, if not more. And the council has to provide the transport to those schools. And the cost of transport of that cohort of children is now over £10 million a year. Councils were not set up to do this. Councils cannot afford it. And around the country, councils are saying there's more money coming in than going out. Now, that doesn't form part of the council's budget because the government also said it's not down to the council to fund this from its budget. So they've stuck it in a sort of account of over here to think about it later. The safety valve is the government's solution to saying we'll help you as long as you accept some really bad stuff. And those really bad stuff is that lots of parents are worried that their children might not be able to go to the schools that they're currently going to. Now, we've said to the government, we would be willing to look at safety valve if the solution is over 15 years, so that no child that's currently in school would be removed from a school that's the right school for them, because we recognise that's important. And we're waiting for the government to tell us if they'll accept a 15-year plan. They want a 5-year plan. 5-year plan's not negotiable. It may be that we can't come to a solution, but the risk around that is that if we don't come to a solution, the government could say, well, if you won't play our game, you've got to find the money yourself. And the amount of money we're talking about could be hundreds of millions of pounds. And that could then risk the future of the council. So it's very, very complicated. It's hugely contentious. Everyone's really worried and upset. And we want to make sure that we do this in a proper stage. So we're due to hear any day now what the government's view is on the proposal that we've put to them. When that comes in, there will be a separate council meeting if it doesn't fit in with the normal schedule of council meetings. Okay, I've only got 1 minute left, so I'm rolling down here to why don't we have any reference? Pearl has asked a question at 1:13 about social care. Why don't we have a reference to, okay, so Pearl's talking about a Lib Dem survey. That's not really relevant. Lib Dem surveys are political things. This is the council. So if you've got So I'm going to move on from that because it's not for the council leader to be talking about what's in a political survey. George wants to know about potholes. Just briefly, George, potholes, huge amount of issue for the council. So I think it's a good place to end. And we're going to go over by a minute or two. So potholes are funded through two methods. The council has a general maintenance fund, so several £million of our budget every year is for road maintenance. So within all of the budget figures that you see is money to cover road maintenance. But each year, the government gives a grant to each council for potholes and road resurfacing. And that grant is decided a year in advance of which roads are going to get the treatment. So you've got the general potholes that are dealt with day to day, and then you've got roads where the potholes are so bad that actually what you need to do is rebuild the roads. The rebuilding of a road, one in my ward was done a couple of weeks ago, and it was something like £200,000 for one road. There's about 6 roads that we're able to do each year with a full rebuild. But so what we have to do is look at other options, which are sort of top coatings and things like that. The government recently announced that they were abandoning HS2, and then they redistributed a load of that money. And one of the MPs was saying that the government gave BCP £19 million. It's not true. The government will be giving BCP around £19 million over 11 years. The money they gave us this year was £604,000. The money they're giving us next year is £604,000. We do not know how that's going to come across. And so the council officers, the professional roads people, have decided, according to the level of need, which of those roads are going to be fixed first. So every ward councillor has contacts within their roads department of people that they can say, hey guys, this road's really, really bad. Can you tell us where it is on the matrix? And in Broadstone, when residents come to me and say, what's happening with XYZ road, I simply send an email to the right officer. They say, oh yes, hang on, Councillor Slade, this is about a third of the way down the list. We reckon it's going to be done in 2 years, 3 years, whatever. That's what you should be doing, is talking to your ward councillors. They can tell you. But going back to what we said right at the beginning, if there is a pothole in a road that you're worried about, you can go online and you can report it just there, and the guys will come out, they'll look at it, they'll usually put some white paint around it so you'll know it's been looked at, and they'll schedule it for a repair. So potholes is a day-to-day job. When we have very wet weather, very cold weather, it can actually create potholes much more quickly than normal. So it is a major problem, and we do understand that for many people, it's the number one thing that they worry about. So please don't think it's being ignored. It's just with 770, I think, miles of road, it's just not possible to do them all straight away. And team working as quickly as they can. I'm really sorry that we have run out of time to answer other questions. It's great that so many people have engaged with this today. We will keep on doing this. Apologies, it's on a Friday. That's not ideal. So please do keep talking to us. But first of all, please talk to your ward councillors. That's what they're there for. Have a look at the budget. Have a read of the papers. There's plenty of information there which answers a lot of these questions. We know sometimes it's in language that might look really technical. So do talk to us and ask the questions, and we'll do our best to make things as plain English as we can. So until next month, it's finally stopped raining, and I hope you have a lovely weekend.